Welcome to another episode of The Family Business, where I am thrilled to introduce you to Carla Leibowitz. I've known Carla for a bit, and I think that her story would certainly resonate in our program where we talk about how family and careers intertwine. Carla, thanks so much for joining.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. If you could just take a quick minute and just give everybody a quick snapshot of where you are today, and then we could start getting to more of the family and fun stuff.
Yeah, right now I am the Chief Business Development Officer at Page AI. We are a company based in New York that is leveraging some pretty unique AI technologies to bring out more information from tissue. And we have a couple of different sets of products. One vertical is really around helping the pathologist in their workflow to make sure they don't miss anything, and to make sure that they're more efficient in their work, because they usually have a huge amount of work to do every day. And the other one is going into what other information we can get from just the histology, the tissue, that can better inform that patient's diagnosis and treatment options.
It's interesting because pathology could really use some digital upgrade, to say the least. Like, who noticed this, or where did this all come from that someone said, look, this is an unmet need? I don't know if it was your CEO or your founder. I don't know where this all came from, but I'm curious what the impetus was all this was.
Yeah, so our company actually spun out of Memorial Sloan Kettering. So there was a center formed at Memorial Sloan Kettering called the Alpert Center for Computational Pathology. And that's where they hired one of the very early pioneers in computational pathology, Thomas Fuchs, into Memorial Sloan Kettering. And then in partnership with the pathology department, they started building these digital pathology systems and AI systems to do mostly research. But the technology got to a place where it was clear that it would be useful in practice. And so that's when Page was launched from Memorial Sloan Kettering. Thomas had been in this space since 2008. So he wrote one of the first papers in this space. But again, there's a lot that happens in research and academia that never makes it to the real world. So the whole idea behind our company was to take these technologies and really productize them, industrialize them, advance them even further, build them under a quality management system, and get them to the place where they could be used as clinical tools.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's amazing what comes from just an idea or a paper. And then, 125 employees later, you raised a significant amount of money. It's happening. And it must be incredibly validating for him, I'm sure, and for everybody on the team. I know some of the folks that work there, and it's quite a group that you guys have put together. So you have this interesting mix of small company and big company background. You worked at Bain, but you also have worked at startups and things like that. So was there a conscious choice to work in both big and small companies, or did you just take each opportunity as it came?
Yeah, there was no real conscious choice. I think there was opportunities that presented themselves. It was always around what I'm really interested in doing, what spaces I'm interested in entering into, what I want to learn, and often these popped up in different ways. So I went to business school a little bit later in my career than most people, because I really got interested in what other things that are not just the medical device itself really play into its success in the market or not. So I started out as a medical device designer, and I got to work with some fantastic physicians in my early career. But sometimes the things we would come up with, even though they worked really well and the doctors wanted them, they wouldn't make it in the market for many, many reasons. So I went to business schools to really start understanding markets and a few other areas, and ended up at Bain a little bit through a lot of my classmates there, because I thought that would be an extension of learning what I went to business school for, really, like how to size markets, how to understand opportunities, how to identify all the stakeholders that can really make or break your company or whatever device you're working on. And then there, I got to do a project around one of the early projects around big data in healthcare, and I got fascinated by that, and ended up going to startups in that space. So it wasn't necessarily that I necessarily wanted to go to startups or bigger companies. It was more about what my role was, what impact I could bring, and also what I could learn.
Yeah, when you read about your background, to you, it's probably that's just my life. I'm too close to it. But when I read it, I mean, we've got to figure out how somebody from Quito wound up at MIT. There's that to unpack, and then all these other items that have started with guidance, and we had talked about that earlier. That in a previous conversation of how that was such a huge building block for, especially for female executives. But I'm curious. So you grew up in Ecuador. How did you wind up coming to school in the States?
Yeah, I grew up in Ecuador. I was born and raised there, and from an early age, I loved math. I loved taking things apart. Once I got to junior high and high school, I really loved physics, and I think engineering really called at me. Um, and when I was a junior in high school, we got connected to a group of missionary doctors that was coming to teach Ecuadorian doctors how to use some new techniques. And by sheer coincidence, I got attached to a set of doctors that were teaching how to do catheterizations in children. And I was their translator. So that's why they reached out to my school. I went to a bilingual school, and I got to see these amazing technologies and the reaction of the Ecuadorian doctors, understanding what these technologies could let them see that they couldn't see before. And I just got completely fascinated by medical technology at that age where you're trying to decide where you want to go to college, what you want to do with your life. And I was like, this is it, right? It was just a moment where I was like, I love engineering and physics. I think I want to be something like an inventor or a designer. But then it all came together at that moment. And in looking at the options of where I could go to learn a lot of these things, I definitely reached high. I wasn't
You think?
confident I would get into MIT, but I had a lot of good mentors that really encouraged me to reach high, and it was a great place for me to really grow.
Well, let's explore that a bit. So, growing up, I mean, I've never been, even though I live in Miami, I've never been down to Ecuador, so I don't know what that must be like to grow up there. How was the encouragement from teachers and your parents and your family about, listen, number one, girls in STEM has always been a subject here in the States. I have no idea what it's like in Ecuador. And then the encouragement to leave the country to go to school. Like, how did that all unpack for you?
Well, I was definitely more of a rare bird, to be just such a nerd, and to have encouragement from teachers and my parents. I think my parents had a lot to do with it. So my mom was one of the few executive women that I knew growing up. So
Mhm.
she worked her whole career, and my dad was incredibly supportive of her. And they always pushed us to reach high academically. So they wanted us to go to the States to study. A lot of people that went to my school, it was a K through 12 bilingual school, did leave the country to go to university. So it was not rare for people to do that. And I think I just really loved school, and I was good at it. And my parents really encouraged that. So it was easy for me when it came to my smaller circle, but I remember meeting people and they were like, "Oh, why would you go to engineering school? You're gonna, just stay home and raise your kids. Why waste the time, and why go somewhere so hard?" So there was a lot of people more in the periphery of my life that really didn't understand the choice. But I think the people that I was closest to, including definitely my mom as a role model, but also the teachers that I became close to as especially in high school, the teachers that really encouraged me in math and physics, that said, you should really pursue a career in this space. That was really good for me because uh, it was not usually the most usual path for people.
I wouldn't think so. Now, you said us. You have a sibling,
I have an older sister.
and was her path similar to yours?
It was somewhat similar, yeah. Yeah, she went to Brown.
Oh, is that all?
And yeah, yes. I think my mom studied chemistry and bio, and immunology actually, and my dad was a math professor for a while. So I think we come from a very academic oriented family.
Yeah, that's amazing. So let's extend that just for a second. How does that facilitate or filter down to your children? Because obviously you and your husband are educated and accomplished and in healthcare, both of you. And obviously their grandparents, they know, I'm sure, enough about that they're let's just say well traveled academically. So how do you as a parent work with your kids on saying, look, school's important. It's not everything. Like, how do you communicate that to them so they don't look at you and go, I can't be you. I'm never going to be able to be you.
That's a great question. So my older kid is 12, and my younger one is 7. And we've taken a bit of a different approach with them. I think we chose to go to a school that is a charter school where we live in St. Carlos, because I think that the skills that worked until now are going to be really different than the skills that will be necessary in the future. So we are trying to encourage them to stay curious, to love learning, and to follow their passions, more than just to excel academically. Because I mean, I work in AI. I know that a lot of things that I was really good at are now automated, and that's just going to increase. And so I think when I think about, and also when I think about the soft skills that I learned over time that I really didn't have, the school that we chose really helps them develop those soft skills from early on, because those are just as important, or even in my role today, even more important than being able to understand technology and biology. It's really around the people. And in my role, I work with people internally at my company and externally at many other companies. And those skills are just really essential. The skills of clear communication and understanding where people are and all of that. So we're actually not pushing them academically as hard as I pushed myself, or I was pushed, because we think the skills that will be needed in the future are a little bit different.
That's very well said. No one has described it that way before. I have 2 teenagers, and academics has gone up and down through our family. And I have 3 degrees, my wife has 2, and my brother's an attorney, and we're a very academically oriented family, and we're all first generation college grads. So my parents worked their tails off, and we found a way for us all to get to school. And so when I look at my kids, I try so hard not to have that same, like you're saying, to make it like this is everything in your life. You have to go to Harvard or whatever it is. So it's interesting from that. Now, is California, would you say, conducive to that kind of mentality? Or is it, because what I had heard growing up, some of the schools are so competitive for young kids to get in, and there's private schools and all kinds of difficulty.
Yeah, I think just like anywhere else, it varies neighborhood to neighborhood here. So I could go south of where I am 10 miles, and you do get those few high schools that are known for being pressure cookers. We chose the neighborhood we live in based on, we wanted really good schools, but we also wanted a slightly more down to earth community than, if you go around Stanford, obviously you have brilliant people there, a lot of professors, a lot of very, very successful entrepreneurs. And we wanted to be close, but not in the middle of that, because I think you could put so much pressure on your children that they kind of become, academic machines, but they don't have a passion, right? Like my older one is a total tinkerer. He's built all sorts of things. He was a Lego maniac, then he moved on to Minecraft. Now he loves electronics and soldering, and we just try to feed that to him, but not just to keep feeding his passion and his curiosity, not so much so that he, wins a national physics contest or something like that.
Let me guess. There was a toy that my son and my nephew, who's a total tinker, used to play with. It was called Snap Circuits, and it was a huge box. Did they have that where it was like a bunch of steps of making different circuits work so that the lights would go off or the helicopter would go up into the air? Yeah, and my nephew is like your son. He lives for that kind of thing. That's amazing. Now, you have a considerable relationship with Stanford from school and from biodesign. I'd love to hear about that. How'd you get into the biodesign program?
So I did a master's there. After I went to Guidant, I did a master's in engineering at Stanford. And one of the reasons I really wanted to do a master's at Stanford was because of the biodesign program. And so I applied to get into that class. It's pretty competitive to even get into that class.
Yeah.
And successfully took the course, and we actually started a company from that class. We incubated it while we all finished our respective masters. We had an MBA, 2 engineering masters, and actually a medical resident in our team. And so we took the biodesign class our first year. And then our second year, we just continued to work on it in our free time. And then we actually launched that startup. That startup kind of failed to take off for many reasons, but I've stayed very close to biodesign. And when I went back to Stanford for my MBA, they were looking for a couple of things. One was an MBA TA. And the second one was they were refreshing the curriculum of the course. So I got very involved there. And had a lot of fun TAing the class. I'd already taken it, so it didn't make sense for me to take it again as an MBA. But I really like the program. I really like the professors there. So it's a great way for me to get involved. And now I go back and give a lecture every year. And I also participate in some of their other activities.
Yeah, that network and what Todd and some of the other people there have built are some of the brightest minds in healthcare on the planet. Is it a bit of a, I don't want to be gender biased here, I'll say fraternity sorority. Is it a bit of a feel like that, where everybody looks out for each other, everybody networks, everybody helps them with fundraising and FDA and other types of things? Is it that kind of relationship once you're in?
Yeah, I think so. It's gotten really big. Obviously, it's run for quite a few years, and I think it's like an open club. It's not like, oh, only the fellows, like you took the class, but you weren't a fellow, so you're a second class citizen. I think there is a kind of LinkedIn network attached to it, and people do post things there every once in a while. But it is kind of like a common language almost, because it both the people that take the class and the people that do the fellowship, and now there's more classes, and there's affiliates all over the world now that teach the same class. It's a common language of understanding how to start a company in healthcare and how to navigate everything that you need to navigate that's uncommon to any other field. But it is a network. I think a lot of people see eye to eye. A lot of people are really passionate about spending their career in an area where you eventually help people and improve people's health. And so I think there's just so much like-mindedness there that it's an easy people to talk to in many ways.
So the one thing that I've noticed is that other universities and other cities are trying. I'm from Cleveland, so I'm aware that the Cleveland Clinic is trying to become an incubator of its own, which it's done successfully in many cases. Does Stanford give them like the roadmap of how we did this, or is it not as collaborative as that?
It's pretty collaborative as far as I know. I'm not super involved here, but I actually am very good friends with one of the professors that teaches that leads the biodesign program at UCLA. And even early on, many years ago, I know the people that started Biodesign India, and there's the book that Biodesign publishes. I think it's in their third edition, that's used in many of these classes and other classes that are similar that might not even have the biodesign name. But I think Paul and Josh's vision when they started all of it was just to fuel innovation. It doesn't have to only be at Stanford. So I know that it is a network, definitely.
So you live in the Bay Area, and Paige is based in New York City. And I realize with the pandemic that things have changed, but I'm curious how you're juggling with your family and being bi-coastal.
Yeah, that was a really big decision. So when Leo reached out about this role at Paige, Leo is our CEO. I was working at NVIDIA and I was leading partnerships in healthcare. It was a really interesting role. It was partnerships in AI and healthcare in multiple areas. So EMR data, radiology, pathology, genomics. But the role that Leo called me for was just really close to a lot of the things I really wanted to do. And it was really, in many ways, a dream job for me, because I really thought that pathology was going to be one of the areas where AI would be the most impactful and the most successful. And also the role itself really played to my strengths. And so definitely had a lot of conversations with my husband, and we decided to go for it, and that we would move, not immediately, but at the end of the next school year with our kids, so that we could figure out exactly where to live and, how Dave's job was going to pan out, whether he could continue doing it remotely or he would get a different job within Genentech or get a different job altogether. The pandemic kind of came before that move date. And since then, Paige grew from about 30 to 125 people in a very remote, distributed fashion. And so we're not going to ask all of our employees to go back to New York. People that want to stay remote can stay remote. And so for now, we're actually not going to move. if the role requires me to move, we'll have that conversation when that happens. But it was definitely one of the hardest parts about making that decision to take the leap to join Page, because I knew it was going to really affect my family. Now it didn't pan out that way, but it would have been a pretty big move because my husband not grew up in California and we've lived here our whole lives together. So it would have been a pretty big shift, but we thought the opportunity was worth it.
Yeah, that's the nature of having a quote unquote power couple, is these groundbreaking opportunities surface for one or sometimes both of you. And then you have children to consider, and you have in-laws and your parents and all these things to think about when these situations come. It's never linear. It's never, okay, if A happens, then I'll just choose this, and if B happens, I'll choose this. There's 13 variables in the middle of it. I mean, imagine if you had sold your house right before the pandemic, and now you're like, well, how do we move in the middle of all this? I don't have a house in California. I don't have a house in New York. You could have really gotten stuck. So for you, it's been a bit of a silver lining in an odd way that all this has transpired. I'm glad to hear that he is able to keep his career going. I know he enjoys Genentech, so that works out well for everybody. And it's a great example for companies across the country in digital health to understand that where you're based doesn't affect your productivity. Although I would wonder for you, with having a family and then having some things to think about, and I'm sure for your husband too, is that it's a 3-hour time difference. So your day is going to be somewhat either longer or stilted. And so what are your thoughts on that? And how does that affect the way that you try to be together with your family and do things as a group?
Well, that's a great question, because I started at 5 this morning.
Yeah, I figured.
And that happens sometimes because it's not just that we're East Coast based, is that we have a growing presence in Europe, both a growing team there, but also for many reasons, Europe has adopted digital pathology faster than the US. And so we have a lot of initiatives going on there. And so often my day is always shifted. And that has pros and cons to it. I don't get to see my kids too much in the morning, but I'm always done at 4. There's like a very strict block in my calendar at 4 p.m. when I'm off. And so that gives me more time in the afternoon with them. So we definitely have a morning parent, afternoon parent thing going. Funny thing is, when I was at business school, it was the exact opposite. But we've always kind of made it work in that sense. It's a little bit harder to have that discipline to go to bed really early in the evening. And on weekends, what I see is if I stay up late on the weekend, then it's much harder to go to bed early. So there's definitely some things we've learned over time, and I'm not perfect at it, but it does have its benefits. I like my afternoon walks with my little one where she gets really chatty, and so it's nice.
I was just going to say, so what happens at 4 o'clock? Do you all go together? Do you give each kid their alone time? Do you give some time with your husband? Like, how do you work all this out?
So my 12-year-old has really changed in the last year, as preteens do. So he's less centered on his parents and a little bit more on his friends and his own things now. So usually right at 4, I do something with my little one. Now it's summer, so it's a bit different. So she comes home from camp, and in COVID times, you just have them all shower as soon as they get home. But then we do something, we bake something, we go on a walk, we go grocery shopping, whatever it is there is to do. My older one has some afternoon activities that we take him to. Usually with my older one, I hang out more after the little one's gone to bed. But the routine is usually, hang out with one kid or both of them, and then start making dinner, have dinner as a family. And then my little one goes to bed. I hang out with the older one. He goes to bed, and sometimes I'll plug back in at night. If I know that there's people in Europe or the East Coast that need something from me, that I want to get to them before I go to bed.
I have this vision of you and your son both wearing those big masks and doing some kind of soldering or some type of, was it an acetylene torch? Do you build stuff together? Because it seems like you both have the same interest.
Yeah, he now likes to do his own tinkering, but definitely there's been many times where we do have a little bit of an area in the garage where we have a lot of tools that he's allowed to use. Power tools have to there has to be a grown up there, not a power drill or something like that, but definitely the more dangerous tools. But there's definitely been many times where it was fun. He wanted to learn how to solder. He actually graduated from snap circuits, and he's like, I want to make my own stuff. I don't like to follow these kits or these instructions. And I was like, oh, I can teach you how to solder. Let's go do it. And now he, built an automatic door closer for his bedroom and like all these other funny things. So yeah, we tinker together. He also loves to talk about art and color, and he's really into digital art now. So there's programs with like 3D modeling, or also a program called Procreate that's kind of like Photoshop for the iPad. And he's now teaching me how to do those things. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's funny. I've been a parent for 17 years, and there, to me, is nothing like when they take an interest in the things that you love, and they grow to love it. And it could be something simple, whether it's a type of music or a particular book or movie, or it's an activity like you're describing. But when they want to do what you do, and then they use your words, and I don't know, to me, I have always get blown away by my kids when they do that. Do you hear him saying what you say, or using tools the way you use them, or approaching problems the way you approach them?
Yeah, it's interesting. He is very independent. He really likes to figure things out on his own, but then I'll give him a small tip, and then I see him use it in so many places. So it's really nice to see. So definitely things like, measure twice, cut once, draw it out before you buy your materials. We do this thing with him when he has a big idea that he wants to build out. It's like we give him a budget, and then we go to Home Depot, and he has to figure out what materials he can buy with that budget. So
that's
so
cool.
yeah, we're trying to get him to be kind of practical, but also teach him some like pre-engineering skills. It's really fun for me.
So is your husband handy and technical like that, or is he kind of left out in that equation?
He likes to work with his hands, but he doesn't have a formal engineering
Right.
education. He studied biology, and then he did an MBA. So it's more of like a Mateo and me kind of thing. But he's happy to supervise, and I don't know anyone that hasn't used a power saw that doesn't think it's just so fun and satisfying. So he likes to get involved too.
That's funny. Yeah, there's a rule in my house. I'm not allowed to use power tools. No one lets me touch them. We have a policy that we call people. They don't let me do it. It's I'll tell you stories another day of things that I've ruined in the house because I'm just not wired that way. I'm much better at being a different kind of activities than that. So, with all that you've accomplished and all that you've done, do you have this feeling of, okay, I have a 7-year-old daughter and she's looking at me on how should what's normal for a woman to work, to have a family, to make these huge decisions, to travel, to be an executive, to have your academic background, all these things. Are you at 7 years old, like having any of these conversations with her, or are you just letting her watch you?
We're not having those conversations so much. There's a movie called Boss Baby. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yes, I do.
And at some point she got the idea based on that movie of like, when I grow up, I'm going to be a CEO.
Awesome.
And
love it.
so she talks about that, and like I'll say something like, I have a board meeting, and she's like, oh yeah, that's really important. So she's also like pretty fearless and a bit very determined, which is maybe harder for us as parents, but I think in the long term it'll serve her really well. But no, we don't have so many of those conversations. She does, talk about, she's like, oh, I want to travel to New York. So she'll mimic a lot of what I'm doing. It's just like, when I grow up, I'm gonna go to New York, and I'm gonna go have dinner with my clients, and it's great. But we try not to set those expectations too much. We really try to. It's been harder for us to understand what really makes her tick. Like with Mateo, it was very clear that the tinkering was there from very early on. Amaya is just enthusiastic about everything, so we're trying to figure out, what do we feed her? Because anything we feed her, she wants to do. So we just try to expose her to a lot of things, but I don't think we're trying to set any expectations about, roles or titles or anything like that, because yeah, we still really don't know where she's going to, specialize, if you want to
And
call it
it's
that.
going to change. I mean, my daughter's 17, and she's had multiple interests in so many things, and done well in several different things, and then left them. And I'm like, wow, really? Mm. She sings like a bird and she dances. And I said, you don't want to do that anymore? She's like, I'm like, okay. I mean, I can't sing or dance at all. I have zero talent. And so I always marvel at people that can. And to just leave that on a table and say, I can come back to that another time. I'm more interested in math right now or whatever it is. I'm blown away. Like for me, if I could sing or dance, I would do that all day. But I can't, so I don't.
Yeah,
Well,
until that moment I told you about, when I saw these like medical devices for the first time, really lucky opportunity to do that at 16 or 17. I never knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. I had a lot of friends that knew from very early on that, they wanted to be a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. I had the hardest time answering that question when I was little. I just didn't know. And so I think that's okay to just explore a lot of things until something clicks.
look, I am the epitome of that. No one goes to college to become what I am. This is you fall into it. Somebody hits you over the head and puts you in an office and you figure it out. And because of it, though, it's the perfect fit for me. I get to speak to brilliant people all day long. I learn things every day. I get to speak to people internationally, which I love. And I get to help people get where they want to go. And I could have never guessed in 1,000 years that this is where I would have wound up. I thought I was going to be an orthodontist at one point. I just wanted to make people smile. And, that was too much science for me. I knew I would never get through that. So I went here. And 20 years later, this is where I am. So it's been a fun ride. You sound like you have a significantly grounded family, which I think is terrific for folks who are high achievers to be able to not pass that on to their kids, to let them become themselves.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and it is hard to do sometimes. As you mentioned, that the Bay Area can be really competitive, and you see, people posting on Facebook what their kids are doing, and how great they are at this and this and that, and it's a constant reminder. It's not in my nature to not push them so hard and not just be so academically focused, but I have to remind myself, like, they're not me, they're different people, they have different interests, their goals might be different, and so just trying to focus on that. So it's a bit of work that happens every day or every week.
Well, it seems to be working out very well. This has been every bit as interesting as I thought it was going to be. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you joining this conversation. I mean, you're deep, a very deep individual. And this has been The Family Business with Carla Leibowitz, where family is what binds us. Thanks so much for joining it. It really was terrific.
Thanks, Matt. This was fun.
All right, Carla. We'll see you soon.
Take care.
Bye-bye.